right, this is the City Council budget meeting. This is May 29, 2019. I have Councilor Caputo.
Yeah.
Councilor Della Sola. Councilor Florio. I have Councilor DePiero.
Here.
Councilor Hill.
Yeah.
Councilor Mike Casey.
Yep.
I have Councilor McLaughlin.
Here.
I have Councilor Napolitano.
Here.
And I have Councilor Simonelli.
Yeah.
My name is President.
Right. There was a communication received from Councilor McKinnon that he has a prior work commitment this evening and can't be here. Will the audience please stand and join us in saluting the flag? One more announcement before we begin. We do have a full house tonight, so I'm sure many of you are aware this Sunday from 2 to 5 at Stewart's, there is an event to benefit the Devon School. I hope many of you can make it there. If you have any questions, you can ask myself or Mr. Parker or Councilor Della Sola, and we'd be happy to give you some more details. Thank you. We are starting with the school department this evening, and welcome, guys. I believe Mrs. Gauthier wants to begin.
Yes, I do. Thank you. So I've prepared a brief statement, just so I don't miss out on any facts. So we're presenting this proposed budget for FY 2020 for your approval tonight. I'd like to share with you the planning process we observed on both sides of Broadway in the true spirit of working strategically and collegially. To begin, we engaged in several meetings between central administration with the mayor, Mr. O'Donnell, and Mr. Demas, in the spirit of identifying our vision as we proposed our own needs and we felt were most instrumental and best served the needs and interests of our teachers, staff, and students. Next, we consulted with our own administrators, principals, assistant principals, directors, coordinators, and department heads to identify their own staffing and program needs. Mr. Demas attended each of our budget meetings while we engaged the mayor in several conversations and close work with us in the school committee. This is a true working document, that is the budget, and that this is the end product of a collaborative effort among all of the stakeholders. So everybody who was anybody was consulted on this. We will be implementing the budget, pending your approval, with fidelity and find that reflects an honest appraisal of the needs of the school department. I'd just like to recognize the support of the mayor and his staff, the school committee, of course, and our own building and content area leaders for their guidance and direction throughout the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Gauthier. Mr. Obremski, do you have a presentation to give? Or how
Well,
would you
before
feel
we
about
get
this?
to the book itself, I'd just like to make sure everybody got some amended line items that were changed last evening in a special school committee meeting. I sent this up to Mr. Mangan this morning. I believe he left it on the table for everybody today, just so you have that, because it's not reflected in the budget book as of yet. I will make those changes pending the budget being passed probably tomorrow, but just so you know that.
Yes, the packet that we have. Councilor DeFlorio?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the overall budget from last year has gone up a total of 6.5 million, plus this other 500,000?
The total budget from last year is probably up with this about $6.2 million. Without this additional appropriation, just at net school spending, what it would have been, we would have had to cut $2.3 million from our present budget right now. But if you factor in what we got last year from you, which is another which was 6.5, our budget would have went down by about, I can give you the exact figure if you want to wait 1 second, I have it right here, Mr. Fleur. The budget would have went down $344,000.
Okay, now, in this budget, you have negotiated with the teachers, and the money is included in this budget?
We have negotiated with the teachers. The teachers have a 2% for this fiscal year that's in the budget, a 2% for next year that's in there, and we have another contract, 2% for fiscal year '21. We are still negotiating with all the groups in there. As a placeholder, we put in the same percentage for this year and next year, but we haven't finished the negotiations with the other bargaining units.
All right. But this budget it should get you through the year. I mean, I understand if there's emergencies. But you're comfortable that it can educate the children, special needs, and so on?
We're comfortable with this budget. There are 52 additional positions that aren't on board right now that we are asking for in this budget. I did put 4 additional pieces of information in the front of everybody's budget book. It's the additional staffing that we were looking for, a PowerPoint presentation explaining why. It's just a list of the staff by school, a breakdown of the chargebacks, in the slide presentation that we presented to the community on May 6th as part of our budget hearing. But we are comfortable that we would not come back for any additional funding unless there was an emergency like a fire or something in a school. We have consulted with Mr. Demas, the school committee, and the mayor, and we would not be asking for any, even if Chapter 70 increased slightly when the House and the Senate finished the budget, we would not be asking for the additional money. We would not be coming back for additional Medicaid money at this point. We're comfortable that we can get through the entire school year with this budget as proposed.
Okay. The other question is, now, I know the senator and the representative are working on getting more money for the schools. If we get that money, that comes back to the city, into the taxpayer.
It will go back into the general fund.
Go back into the general fund. Now, the other question I have is actually from Mr. Demas. In regards to this additional, Mr. Demas was included in this, and are they okay with it?
Mr. Demas, the mayor, and Mr. O'Donnell were included in multiple conversations in regard to those positions, as well as we had a special school committee meeting last week, as well as the School Finance Review Commission, which met last Thursday evening. So everybody that we can think of was included in that.
Okay. Well, I have no problem. I had 5 kids in the Everett school system. Somebody had to pay taxes to educate my kids, and I'm ready to pay taxes to pay the future kids. So I have no issue or no problem with this budget. As long as the mayor and Mr. Demas tells us we can afford it, I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before I open up to other speakers, do you want to go through this document, Mr. Obremski? I think it could answer other questions that the board may have, just the overview presentation, or if you have something else planned.
We planned on going through the budget book, but I have that. I don't have it on a PowerPoint that I could show the audience, but if you want, I can go through that document just like I did.
Would that be helpful to the board?
It's totally up to the individuals.
Yeah. Yes, Mr. Parker?
If I can just clarify, the document for the $505,000 for the additional positions and the additional cuts, which are all non-instructional, this is not in addition to the budget. The budget that we approved earlier this year was about an operating budget of about $89 million back in May. What we did last night is we kind of reallocated and shuffled some line items around. So with these changes, both the deletions and additions, our operating budget is still at $89 million. So it's not another $505,000. Just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So at the request of Mr. DePiero, I want to make sure everybody's looking at the correct document. It would be
Looks like this, Councilor.
the one that's proposed fiscal. It's the slide presentation with the slides on it. I'm sorry. So if you turn to page 2, the school department proposed operating budget, we'll call it at this point, for fiscal year '20 would be $85,351,821, not including special ed transportation in the amount of $4.5 million. That actually is going down with the Devon School and a lot of autistic programs that we brought in-house rather than transport the students out of the district. We're able, over the last couple of years, we believe we've been able to save money, and we can cut that line item by $200,000. So the total operating budget that we're asking for is $89,851,821, which at this point would be $6.5 million above net school spending. The next page is the source of the funding. So as you can see, net minimum contribution, this is the minimum amount of money the city must give for education for fiscal year '20, set by the state when the governor's House 1 budget came out in late January, early February, at $30,615,794. It's approximately 29% of the budget. Now, you got to remember, that doesn't include the $6.5 million, okay? That's only the minimum amount. The state aid or Chapter 70 money is about 71% of the budget at $73,723,639 for a total net school spending requirement of $104,339,433. Then you have what's called chargebacks. These are costs associated with running the school department. I'll explain them in more detail in a few minutes. It's $25,487,612, and Mr. Demas and I have agreed that those are the costs for next year based on a formula that was created in 1993, 1994, and it's signed by the mayor and the superintendent each year. So the school department minimum operating budget would have been $78,851,821, but we're asking for an additional $6.5 million above net school spending, most of it, but not all of it, to hire 52 additional staff at various positions throughout the district. So that would give the operating budget of $85,351,821. The next few pages go over the chargebacks. We pay all the Board of Health expenses, that's all the nurses in the schools, 16 licensed nurses, 1 LPN, the per diems when the nurses office, and we pay a quarter of the salary of the Board of Health director and a quarter of the clerk for the Board of Health. So it comes to a little bit over $1.2 million. We pay 43%, which is basically what our percentage of the budget was in fiscal 19, of the auditor's office, the budget office, which I believe now is part of the auditor's office, the treasurer, purchasing, and personnel departments. We pay for the use of Everett Stadium, $46,000. All the health insurance for our present employees, which is $9,198,205. If this budget passes, though, as is, with those 52 additional individuals, there would be another $796,138 that would be incurred in health insurance costs, which Mr. Demas and the school committee and myself have worked out. We would reduce our budget by a little bit over $856,000 at some point and use revolving accounts to pay that. But Mr. Demas and I don't want to answer for him, but he could come up later if you ask, have agreed that we want to present the budget as a whole right now and worry about that later, okay? The health insurance for retired teachers, which comes off the cherry sheet, which comes out from the governor's office in late January, a little bit over $1.9 million. Pay for all the city retirement for our custodians, our clerical and paraprofessionals, a little bit over $1.5 million. You hear a lot about charter school tuition. We pay all the tuition for our students in charter school. There's approximately 750 students right now at various charter schools around Everett. The total assessment is a little bit over $10 million. Then we get some reimbursement from the state, a little bit over $1 million. So the net is $9,122,919. We pay workman's compensation, trust and claims, $220,000. Life insurance, $35,000. Medicare, $695,292, and that may go up by $60,000 with the additional employees if you pass the budget as a whole. We pay all the unemployment because we're self-insured for anyone who gets laid off, $362,000. The insurance on the school building is a little bit under $300,000. We pay for 2 school resource officers located at the high school, bringing the total charge back to $25,487,612. Now, the next is the percentage of the budget and what each category would come out to if we got the minimum. So as you can see, from 19 to 20, it goes up drastically, the amount of money we're asking for. In the blue is the minimum contribution by the city. That's at $30.6 million. The red is the Chapter 70 money at $73.7 million. And the green is the special ed transportation, which actually is going down by $200,000. And that doesn't include, that $83.3 million does not include the additional $6.5 million. That's just money that the state is saying we need to spend. Next is the budget by category. On the next slide. Central administration, the total percent of the budget by category is 4% of the budget, a little bit over $3.5 million. Instructional, which is most of the teachers, is 60% of the budget at $51,484,000. Special education costs are 26% of the budget, or $22 million. Athletics, 1% at $400,000. And maintenance, 9% at a little bit over $7.8 million. But 87% of the budget is direct services to students. The next is the salaries by category. As you can see there in the purple, 77% of our budget is in salaries. A little bit over $65 million, almost $66 million, $65,973,821. Non-salaried employees in the orange, 20% of the budget at $17 million. In utilities in the gray, 3% at $2.3 million. Next is the salaries by category. Instructional, as you can see, is the largest percentage of our budget in the salaries part at 92%, or $60,948,000. That's there in the green. The instructional is the teachers, the principals, assistant principals, paraprofessionals, and directors. Central administration in the blue, 4% of the budget, $2,458,000 is for the superintendent, the assistant superintendents, the clerical staff, the attendance officers, and the director of Parent Information Center at 4%. In the maintenance in the gray, at 4% is the custodians, the house workers, and the supervisor of the custodians. Next part is the general expenditures by category. And as you can see, central administration there in the blue at 6% is a little bit over $1 million. That's for all the police details, labeled consultants or attorneys, professional development workshops, copier lease, and office supplies. Instructional in the green at 12% of the budget, a little bit over $2.2 million, is for textbooks, supplies like paper, pencils, music department expenses, special requests by the principal, graduation expenses, occupational education or culinary arts expenses, computer purchases, and TV and library expenses. Special education at 53% in the orange, $10,285,000 is for clinical testing, psychologists, therapists, which is physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapists, out-of-district tuition, and the Gateway to College program that we started with Bunker Hill a couple years ago. That's at 53% of the budget. Athletics at 2% there in the yellow is $400,000, and that's for uniforms, equipment, the buses to and from the games, physicals, and ice rentals for hockey. Maintenance in the gray at 27% of the budget is $5,325,000. That's for utilities, which is gas and electric, will come to $2.3 million. General work, $428,000. The HVAC contract, the cleaning contract, the lease and taxes for the Devon School, and the lease for the garage to house our trucks, and for snow plowing expenses. And 67% of all the general expenditures are directed to students. The next slide is very important to note here, is that when you compare per pupil expenditures to the surrounding communities, as many of you have lived in Everett for a number of years, these are really the former Greater Boston League communities. Everett has the lowest per pupil expenditure of any of the surrounding communities at $14,578. If we had just what Malden spent, we would have another $300,000. We had what Revere spent per student, we have another 1.6. We had what Medford spent, another 27.5. And I don't want to go into Cambridge, they spend twice as much money as anybody else, they have another 120 million. But just with the state average alone, if we got the state average, we would have another $7.5 million just with the state average. The next slide is the percent of the city budget that the school department is for fiscal year 19. As you can see, we're at 83.9% or 39% of the budget, and this does count the water enterprise. So just so you are aware of that, it's not just a city, it's a city budget plus the water enterprise. The total city budget would have been $215.6 million. We're about 39% in fiscal year 19 of the city budget. The last slide is what we've been talking about for a number of years, the free and reduced lunch versus the economically disadvantaged students, where we lost a lot of money in the Chapter 70 funding. In fiscal year 16, we had 5,827 students. Fiscal year 20, we only account for 4,362. Now, these students didn't leave the schools. They're just not on state-assisted programs like SNAP or TANF or Medicaid, so they're not eligible to be counted, and you get extra money for these students. For every one of these students, you get an extra $4,362. If we had just that, at the number that we're missing, the 1,465, we basically have what we're asking for above net school spending. We'd have $6.4 million. We're asking you for $6.5 million. So if they go back and change the funding formula for fiscal year 21, maybe we don't have to come back and ask for any money above net school spending. Hopefully that's the case. You know, I do want to end this by, we appreciate anything you can do to help the students and the teachers and the staff in the Everett Public Schools, and we think we did a thorough job on this budget. We met with the mayor. We brought all the principals to meet with the mayor and his staff a couple of times, so they heard right from the principals why they need this additional staff. We did the same thing with the School Finance Review Commission, brought the principals right here, so they can explain why they feel they need these additional staff, because that's where a lot of the cost is. If you look at the budget book, those 52 additional people at an average salary of $75,000 comes to $4,147,000, and that's a lot of the additional funding that we're asking for. But we think there's a need for it in this community. Thank you.
Councilor Napolitano, are you all set now?
Yes, I'm all set, thank you.
Councilor
Great
McLaughlin?
presentation.
You have Councilor Delasola next.
Good evening. It's great information, right down to the wire on pretty much everything here. I have a couple of questions. The teachers last year, they were all brought back, correct? That were let go, all came back?
Not all the teachers that were let go were brought back. Some were for reasons from the principals, some at the time when we got the additional funding in around November were not available at that time. But we did bring back a number of staff. Out of the $2.5 million additional that we got in November, we're probably, in regards to adding staff, we're probably up to a little less than $2.3 million in spending. So it's about a little over $200,000 still left that we haven't spent out of that additional funding.
Okay, and how many extra teachers do we have coming on this year?
We're asking for what we presently have on staff, plus an additional 52 staff.
And can you explain shortly what they'll be doing? Is it extra classrooms?
Yeah, there's a PowerPoint in there that we can actually put up on the screen. We actually brought that with us, that we can put up on
Okay.
the screen so the audience can see if you just give us a minute.
Sure.
We can put it, so it'll make it easy for the audience.
I'll yield the floor.
And then Mr. Shaw will go through that part of the
Thank you.
presentation.
While Mr. Delgazo does that, Councilor Marchese?
How are you, Mr. Obrinsky?
Great, thank you.
Quick question. What is our contribution to the schools actually? What's the city's, minus the Chapter 70 money? What actually is it?
So for fiscal year 20,
Yep,
the city has to give us a minimum of $30,615,794.
yep.
You also, we give back to the city in chargebacks, $25,487,612. And then after that math, that's a little bit, it's approximately $5 million, Mr. Marchese,
Yep.
doing it quickly. We're asking for another $6.5 million over that,
Okay.
okay?
One more question. What is the cost per student for the charter schools? For a charter school student,
I
I
have
know
that
it's
right
quite
here.
substantially,
$12,878.
it's lower than what national, okay, that's all. And it's 700?
750.
750. Is their transportation paid by the schools, or do we pay for their transportation?
We do not pay for charter school
We don't pay for
transportation. No.
But we do have to reimburse the,
Now, you want to answer?
sure, Dave.
The reason why the charter school tuition costs are lower than our per pupil costs is because in determining the formula, the charter schools are not eligible to receive the funding that we receive for our in-district special education costs, so that would actually bring the cost down. So that's why it's not like the 14,578. It's because of some special education and in-district costs that they're not eligible to receive. And that was an issue that was discussed several years ago up at the State House, because the charter schools don't necessarily reflect the sending districts, what their special education needs are. They have and this was from the director of special charter schools across the state, stating that the amount of kids that are in special education services in charter schools is drastically different than what the sending districts are.
You know, the last question is, what I saying is the cost to the city of Everett minus the Chapter 70 contribution is very minimal when you put in the chargeback. It's more like a wash.
Well, it's not a wash, it's still $5 million, and
what I'm
a
saying.
lot of
Yep.
those costs, when Chapter 78 came and the whole funding formula changed in
Yep.
1993, 94 era, that chargeback agreement was put in because they're legitimate charges that the city wouldn't have without the school department. Like, for example, we have approximately 950 employees. Without all the employees on our side, the city may not need as many workers in certain departments to handle the load of the work. So there are the legitimate expenses that we go through every year. That agreement, I don't believe, has changed drastically over the 25 or so years, but it does get looked at.
But what I'm saying is for the quality education and the employees, doesn't really cost the city a lot with the Chapter 70 money. That's what I'm just getting at. You get a lot of bang for your buck for $30, $40 million. That's what
We get a lot of bang. The teachers, the administrators, the paras, the custodians, the clerical, they do a great job, and we get a lot of support from the school committee, the city council, the mayor's office. It's everyone working together. That's why the community is the community the way it is, and the educational system is a great educational system. Everybody's working together.
Thank you.
Councilor Capone?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to our guests. First of all, I appreciate the collaborative effort that went into this year. It shows that we're all going for the same goal, which is to educate our students, provide them the best opportunities possible. And I know firsthand from being at the school, from the various functions, whether it's band performances or whether it's culinary, doing a tremendous job. So I appreciate, and I know my colleagues appreciate the effort that all of you are doing. A couple of quick questions. As far as the chargebacks, everybody's in agreement on what that was, because I know in the past that's been an issue of maybe some debate about what was in, what was out. So that was on page 3, the $25.4 million. Those are all agreed chargebacks?
The only one that would even be in, 3 that could be in question, depending on the funding that you give us, would be the insurance for all the employees next year, the Medicare, because you have to pay 1.45% for the Medicare, and the life insurance, which is a very small amount, $35,112, may go up by down by a couple of $1,000s, nothing
Okay.
drastic.
Okay.
I believe everything else is agreed upon between myself and Mr. Demas at this point.
Okay, excellent. I'm glad to hear that. And then the most telling thing to me is on page 11, where you have the per pupil expenditures. Obviously, Everett is the lowest, and it's several $1,000s below the state average. That was fiscal year 18. Do we have numbers on fiscal year 19?
They won't be complete till around March of 20.
So we're not able.
Yeah, I have to do an end-of-the-year report, tie up all the money, turn it in, and it gets audited, so around March of 20.
And you had mentioned that just to get to the state average, it would be over $7.5 million. So it's still less than what you're looking for above the city's contribution.
Actually, I apologize, it would be 15 million, not 7.5, 15 million, I'm sorry.
Oh, so a little bit different.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
So that's tremendous. You look at that, you see that number, you see the discrepancy in the surrounding communities, you see what the state average is, and I would say that our students are nothing near average. So I thank you for everything that all of you collectively are doing.
Mr. Parker, then we'll move on with the presentation.
Okay, and just in follow-up to that, credit Stu where it's due. In fiscal year 18, we look at all the gateway cities across the Commonwealth, which Everett is amongst. Everett led net school spending by 8.4%. So another view when you're looking at who we compare ourselves to from a diversity educational standpoint, New Bedford, Lawrence, Fall River, Leominster. Everett, with everybody's help, leads the pack in net school spending with 8.4%. Thank you. And no one's even close. I think Taunton's at 4. So.
Thank you. It's all set.
Mr. Shaw?
Yeah, thank you. What? Thank you.
And here's Kevin Shaw.
Entrance music.
What a great intro. That was great. What I was able to do is to break down, after meeting with each of the principals, we met with all the principals, asked what their requests were for personnel, and what the PowerPoint you're going to watch right now, and you have in your folder and your booklets right now, what some of the class sizes would be with the additional personnel and what the class sizes would be without the personnel, as well as some of the specialized personnel that each school was looking down at, broken down by school. So the first school was the English school. As you can see, the English school was looking for a grade 2 teacher, a grade 3 teacher, and a grade 4 teacher. And you can see the class sizes would be without these teachers, they'd be up 27, 28, and 24. And with those additional teachers, if we put an additional teacher in each of those grades, it would be 19, 21, and 20. Grade 5, they're going to close it and still keep the class size at 25. We try to keep our class sizes at the lower grades, 21, 22, 24, 25, 26, you can handle in a little bit of the upper grades. Also at the English school, they're looking for an additional art teacher, a special ed inclusion teacher, 2 English language learner teachers, and a math interventionist and a literacy interventionist. You're going to see that interventionist in a lot of the different schools. The interventionists, the teachers, the specialized teachers that come in and work with our lowest performing students, our students that need the most help, I should say. And they take them out in individualized instruction and small group instruction. And when they reach those benchmarks that they're supposed to be at, they return those students back into the general population, take other kids after that. So you're going to see that we cut all of those, we had to cut all of those in the budget this year, and all the principals are looking for those back because those are helping our scores and helping those students succeed. So you're going to see that at each of the schools. At the Cavarian School, they're looking to close a grade 1 class, and like I said, still keep it at 21. Open a grade 3, it would be 27 if we didn't, and 22 if we did. Close a grade 6, and open an 8th grade math class, because otherwise class sizes in grade 8 would be 33, and a much more reasonable 26 with that additional math teacher. Also at the Cavarian School, they're looking for an art teacher, a guidance counselor, 5 English language learner teachers, a Wilson reading teacher, that's a specialized reading program that we have, once again, for our at-risk students, and students that need that individualized help. It's a great program, really helps our students, and they're also going to get a math and literacy interventionist. The English language learner, we're having 5 there because we're changing the method that we're receiving and giving instruction in English language learners. We used to pull the students out in small groups. We found, and then research has shown, that leaving those students in the classroom and putting an additional teacher in there, and that teacher rotates through a couple of different classrooms at each grade level, that's how those students succeed, and that's what makes those students succeed. So that's the model that we're using. That's why we need 5 additional English language learner teachers. At the Lafayette School, they're looking for a grade 2 teacher to bring class sizes down to 24. A grade 3 teacher, they're going to close because they can keep it at 22. A grade 4 classroom teacher and a grade 7 math, once again, instead of in the 30s, that would be a 26 average on class size. An art teacher, a guidance counselor, and once again, the literacy and math interventionists at the Lafayette School. The Parlin School, grade 1 would be 31 if we didn't hire another teacher, so it's down to 25, which is still on the larger side. The Parlin, class size is going to be a little bit larger because we don't have the space to hire more teachers at the Parlin School. Grade 3, another teacher, so it's not 35, it's 26. We can close a grade 4 and open up a grade 5, so it's in the mid-20s once again. Parlin School is also looking for 3 English language learner teachers, a guidance counselor, 2 math interventionists, and a Wilson reading teacher as well. The Webster School is looking for 2 classroom teachers, one a grade 3 and one a grade 4. Class sizes would be 31 and 26 instead of 20 and 17 if we didn't hire them. And a dedicated technology teacher. The Webster School does not have a dedicated computer teacher like all of the other schools do. They didn't have a computer lab, but now we have a lot of carts, so we can bring laptops into the classroom, so the technology teacher can go into the classroom and teach the whole class technology. The Whittier School is looking for a grade 4 teacher, a grade 6 teacher to bring them from the high 20s to the low 20s, a grade 7 and 8th math teacher. That's one teacher that does both grade levels. Once again, bringing it down from the 30s to the 20s, and they're going to close a grade 2 classroom, close a grade 5 classroom, and maintain relatively small class sizes. They're also looking for an additional special education inclusion teacher, an English language learner teacher, math interventionist, literacy interventionist, and a Wilson teacher. The Devon School is looking for a job coach. That's a person that would work with the students at the Devon School to assist them in finding employment within the community, getting out and making relationships with the businesses in the community, and trying to get job skills for the students in the class at the Devon School so we can get them employed upon graduation and during the summer and during the school year. The high school is looking for a director of social studies, an English language learner coordinator, an English language learner department head. That's a district-wide position. We just listed it under the high school. 2 additional deans, a director of academies, and we're going to cut 3 hallway supervisors. And they're also looking for a physics, math, Spanish, phys ed, health, and art teacher. And those are all to maintain class sizes. It's hard to put class size at the high school level because they're scattered all over the place, so it's difficult to say what the average class size. But those are the 52 positions, and that would be the impact of those 52 positions on each of the schools.
Councilor Marchese?
What does hallway supervisor cut mean?
Right, hallway supervisors walk the halls of the high school, maintain an order in
What does
the
it
hallways.
say cut?
They're going to cut those three of those. We have 5.
Yep.
We're going to cut 3, so we'd have 2.
Is that sufficient for the high school?
It's, we've talked at the high school level. I think that we have to look at a couple of various different things, and if we don't, these numbers are reflective of what the present population is and what we're expected to be. And I think that's one of the positions that Mr. Norman and Mr. Barrett would like to restore. If we didn't have to hire, for instance, a phys ed teacher, that we'd use that money to hire another hallway supervisor.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Councilor DeFlorio?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In regards to the job coach for the Devon School.
Yep.
This is a new position, right?
Correct.
We didn't have that before?
Correct.
Okay, is this job coach only for the Devon School?
I think we've talked to the high school as well, so I think that person would go service the Devon School as well as the high school.
Yeah, because I was going to say, I mean,
But it's probably not a full-time job just at the Devon School. I think
Right.
in conversations, we put it under the Devon School, but in reality, I think that would be a dual role that they'd be servicing both of those schools.
okay. Yeah, because I mean, I'd like to see them work with all the students at the high school and
Yep.
make sure that these students have something when they get out of school.
Absolutely.
Make sure everybody's working. And, you know, get them to the trade school. Now, we have some trade going on.
That's correct.
But not a full trade school, right?
We
have
have,
6 shops going right now.
Oh, we do,
We have,
okay.
we have 6 shops going, and we're adding 2 more this summer for next year, and then hopefully adding 3 more the year after that.
Okay. Yeah, that's important because, you know, a lot of
No,
kids
that's-
don't like college. I know I had
No,
2 of mine
And the
that
job mar-
started
and the job
college when they
market's there,
left, so-
right, right.
All right, thank you.
yeah, we have 6 shops presently certified vocational programs in the high school. We're adding 2 more next year, medical assisting and web design. It's part of CIP, if you saw it in the CIP in your budget book. One of the actually bid opening is next week. We can't award it till obviously everything passes in CIP and the budget passes. We will do that work this summer, so that we'll open. And then we're looking at another facility to possibly do some minor renovations or some renovations. It won't be for another year, to add electrical, HVAC, and plumbing.
Thank you. Councilor Hamlin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we could go back to the class sizes that we had started with, and we just picked the Whittier School, and I'm going to grab the 6th grade.
Yep.
Just so you. I suppose I gotta grab one up in the beginning, a bit better. Okay, we're looking at grade 6, we're saying that class size without is 29, class size with the additional teacher is 22. So what it's telling me, I believe, is that you're going to take from the 6th grade classes a sufficient number of students so that the new class size would be 22, but so won't all the other sizes be classes be 22?
The average class size would be 22
grade
for all the
six.
6th grade
Okay,
classrooms,
so
correct?
how many classrooms in grade 6, and this would be the same with all the other ones, are we talking about reducing that number down so that you wind up with 22 students for all of them? So
Well, at every school, it's different, because some, like the Whittier School, I think they might have, Mr. Brady's here, three 6th grades right now, so we're
Okay.
looking to open up an additional 4th. Some of the other schools already have 4, we might be opening a 5th one up.
Okay,
So it's different, but every one that's listed right here would only be 1 per grade level.
Right. but
So
all
where
the
I say
other-
grade 4, it's 1 grade 4
But the other
teacher.
classes, no matter how many there are, will be down to approximately the 22 class size?
That's correct.
Okay,
That's correct.
thank you.
Counselor Napolitano next.
Thank you. Great presentation, by the way. It shows that, gives a breakdown of just how the money is being spent, how the distribution of classes are. We all know large classes have a deterrent effect on learning, so this takes some of the pressure off our teachers. Very good. How is the acclimation of our English second language or our non-English speaking students? I see that there's a lot of effort, looks like a lot more money this year focused on English language learning and creating a department head, a coordinator, which I think is an excellent step. But do you have a roughly idea what the percentage ratio is? How much of it is it impacting?
The English language, Ms. Auger is here.
So we're currently 26% students who are identified as English learners, which means amongst that group of about 1,900 students, we have level ones who have very little proficiency in English, although
She's gonna bring her up. Yes, people get, yeah.
Could you repeat that? No, I heard it was excellent. But for the public, please.
Hi, I'm Ann Auger, the English Learner Director. Right now, we are 26% English learners, which is roughly 1,900 students between pre-K and 12th grade. They're identified as English learners, and that means they have a level between 1 and 5. Level 1s are typically brand new to the country and have a very low proficiency in English. And then we have students who are level 4s and 5s who are close to the proficiency of a native English-speaking peer.
And it is important to invest in this population of our students because this is the next generation.
Absolutely.
I remember hearing stories of my father telling me with some of his cousins, when they came here from Italy, they couldn't speak any English. Depending on how hard they were able to pick it up or not, really had a big impact on on where they ended up eventually. So it is important, and I really appreciate the fact that you're putting such a concentrated effort into this because the problems, well, it's not a problem, but the issue is going to just get larger, and the better prepared you are to deal with it, the better our students are prepared for the future of Everett. Thank you.
Thank you.
Counselor Marchese?
What do the deans do?
The deans at the high school presently handle a lot of the discipline. There's presently, a few years ago, we had 5. Right now, we're down to 3 because one left and we were unable to fill the position. We brought a retired teacher back who was a dean to help out a little bit. But Mr. Norman is looking to restructure the high school and go to, I don't know if you've heard a lot about the academy structure that we're going to. So we're looking to change the title from dean to assistant principal. So Mr. Norman in this budget, and it does reflect in here, is looking to make, I'm not saying make the deans because we'd have to re-advertise the jobs, create 5 assistant principals, 1 for each academy. So he's going to break the high school, and we're using an approximate size of 2,000 students into 5 academies of approximately 400 students each, and have the assistant principals in charge of those. So instead of just doing discipline, Mr. Marchese, they would do a lot of the evaluations of the staff and handle a lot of what goes on in that particular academy.
So we're more or less just flipping the hallway supervisors' cuts to deans.
It would end up being assistant principals rather than deans. That's going to be the new title.
But the hallway supervisors that we're cutting.
Right.
two of them-
Those will, that money will go into assistant principals.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr.
I'm
Mackey,
sorry.
the dean is like the old submaster. When we all went to school, that was the submaster who handled all the discipline. So we just created it as a dean position, but now, like Mr. Abramsky said, we're moving that to an assistant principal position.
Thank you.
Counselor Hanlon.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Obremski, I don't know how far back you go, but actually we do. But the per pupil expenditure, you don't have to look, is $14,000. How far back can you go and tell me what your per pupil expenditure was for each year? Can you go back 15 years?
I believe I can go on the Department of Education website. I believe it might go back to 1993. I can find out tomorrow. I think it goes back to 1993.
Nothing to do with this budget, just
Yeah.
some statistics I'm doing.
Yeah.
I would appreciate it.
I will look it up tomorrow and get it to you, Mr. Hanlon.
Thank you.
Before the next speaker, I also want to recognize the school committee members that are here in the collaborative effort that went into this. We have Mr. Parker, Mr. Ela, Mr. Almeida Barros, Mr. D'Onofrio, Mr. Panarisi, and Mrs. Cardello. And I also see Senator DiDomenico. I know he's working hard every day on the Hill to get this formula changed to make it a level playing field. So thank you, everyone, for your effort. Next speaker is Councilor DeFlorio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to make a motion to accept this. There's no reason to go through the budget book. You've already told us everything that we need to know. So there's no reason that we should go line item to line item. So I request that we accept this, refer it to our meeting of, in June, what is it, June 10th, is it?
June 10th.
June 10th.
Refer to our meeting of June 10th. I ask for favorable recommendation and call for the question.
Second.
Motion has been made,
That's not a
second,
good
and the
one. You can't
question
call.
was called. Does it have to be a roll call, Mr. Clerk?
I have the floor.
Motion made to accept the school budget favorably. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Already done.
Budget has been accepted favorably.
I'll tell you why.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
6 minutes.
You can't get up and speak on the motion.
Call for a 10-minute recess to give everyone a chance to get settled.
I got your brother's car in my
I
yard if you
know.
want to steal it.
He can't part with that
Does he
car.
owe you any money? Take the car.
Good thing I brought all my stuff with me.
Take care of that.
I didn't know they were going to do that.
right, folks, get back to work. We'll take the libraries first, because I assume it'll be quicker than DPW. I think Mr. Latanzi is here to represent the library.
Mr.
Counselor
Chairman,
Capone?
I'm going to step out as my wife is on the Board of Trustees.
Thank you. Libraries are page 128. Mr. Latanzi is here to represent the department, yes. And Mr. Demus as well.
To lead off with the libraries, if I may add just one item of interest for the council. The total recommendation for the libraries is $1,187,725. And this is the amount required by the state, the minimum amount to ensure that we remain on the Nobel Network, we continue with our state aid. So I just wanted to make sure that if the council was aware that any proposed cuts would jeopardize our accreditation.
And whereas there was some confusion last budget meeting with the pages, so I'd actually like to have everyone go to page 130, because that's, all line items are broken down, and there are notes directly next to each line item to help us all have a better understanding of each item. So if you look at page 130, and whenever the board is ready, Councilor McLaughlin is the first speaker.
You can't cut anything, really. Stuffy, I can't hear anything.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I was just wondering, do we have a new librarian in this?
Oh.
I didn't know if, just a clarification of that.
No, we're in the process. The position has been posted, accepting applications.
Also, the current librarian
She
has
retired.
departed?
Her last day was, I believe, last Friday.
Oh, I apologize. So I
The
missed
Friday prior.
Okay, I apologize. I didn't realize it. That's why
Yeah.
I was wondering why you guys were in instead of her.
She's
Okay,
not
so she's no longer.
That's correct.
She's retired.
She applied for retirement, and she retired.
And whatever the salary is in this book will reflect what the new person will come in as, or
No.
that will be subject to change upon a hiring.
It's a budgeted number.
Okay.
And just because the budget is, say, for simple purposes, $80,000 for a position, when we actually go out and hire, we don't just automatically award the amount that has been budgeted. The salary is always based upon years of experience, educational background, and the like. So it's very similar to like when the school department just said they were adding 51 positions. They averaged those positions at $75,000.
Sure.
That doesn't mean that those 51 positions will come in at 75. Some will probably come in higher based upon their education and experience level, and some will come in lower. So the situation with our salary lines on the city side is very similar when we have vacancies.
Okay. So at some point, could you just provide us that detailed information throughout the year when it happens, the new hiring?
Sure.
Just kind of reflect the budget. But
Sure, upon hiring.
Yeah, that's just my question. I didn't realize that it happened, sorry.
Councilor Hanlon.
The $1,187,725, what if we did cut $10,000 out of that?
It
What
would,
would
it would jeopardize our state funding. It would jeopardize, it's our minimum annual contribution. It would jeopardize our ability to remain on the state's Nobel Network. So there are significant ramifications.
So we would lose it all?
We will, potentially. I don't know if they would put us on probation. I don't know if it would be an automatic, but as of right now, the way we're viewing it is that this is the minimum required amount that needs to be budgeted to maintain those levels, which is what we're recommending.
So all we can do right now is switch things around, but we gotta stay with that same.
It would be my recommendation so that we don't jeopardize any of those benefits.
Yeah,
Second.
second motion.
Second motion.
We all set with our guests?
Yep.
Thank you very much, Mr. Latanzi and Mr.
Thank
Demus. There are no recommendations for cuts to accept the library budget. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. We'll move on to DPW, Department of Public Works. Which is
That one needs 80.
page 81, counselors.
31?
81.
81?
81. Counselor Capone?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to our guests. First, I want to publicly acknowledge that I contact you frequently, and you always respond quickly, and you always address everything. So I want to thank you for that. With regards to the budget, the two items I'm looking at, well, actually, one really. It's a little bit higher than the previous budget year, seasonal employees. Could you just explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so seasonal employees, we have a number of parks that have, for the last several years, been offline. We have the park, the DPW, DPW seasonal program, which brings in some of the high school kids during the summertime to watch these parks. We have a number of splash pads that have come online, so we're expecting a higher use of some of the parks that were previously closed, and that number reflects that increase.
Okay. All right, thank you. I don't have any other questions on that page.
Counselor McLaughlin?
Actually, my question was on the seasonal employees, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Counselor Marchese?
I see a big difference in the requested and recommended. Do we have less employees down there?
Is that the salary line item?
Salary line item, yes, right, page 81. Yeah, the top one, top figure, 997 to 670.
Correct. If you look on page 83, you can see a number of the unfilled positions in the fleet department currently have been budgeted at a reduced rate.
They've been budgeted, right? No? Oh, they're requesting, right, the money, but they're not budgeted yet?
There are some vacancies that we've had down at DPW
Yep.
for the past few months. And based upon operations and DPW management's ability to still get their priorities accomplished, we made the determination that we're not proposing to fill some of those vacancies. One of those, in addition to the items in fleet, is the DPW business manager.
Yep.
He is no longer working full-time for us.
What does the business manager do down there?
The business manager predominantly would oversee contracts, oversee clerical staff, all of the administrative functions, work with the lead supervisors to gather the specs, to work with the procurement office to make sure that everybody down there was fully complying with all Mass General laws. We've made so many improvements down there in the last 2 years that we identified when that person was no longer fulfilling that position, that we combined that position with the chief procurement officer. And if you recall back when the city council reviewed the purchasing budget, there was a sizable increase for the chief procurement officer. The bulk of that, though, was due to a change in hours. The chief procurement officer currently is at 35 hours a week and will be working actually 40 hours a week and working on Fridays down to DPW. So because of the improvements that we were able to make, additional policies and procedures, it no longer really required a full-time position, especially because that position worked so closely with the chief procurement officer. We're able to eliminate a 40-hour-a-week position with only adding on.
That's good to know. I
5
watching for
hours.
Steve, it's very, very well to see that there's a drop somewhere. Something's being more efficient, obviously. But thank you.
Counselor Della Sola?
Good evening. That was one of my questions, but the other question would be the fleet manager. Is that the same thing we just talked about?
Yeah, so
About the business manager?
So a
Same
number of
item?
those management activities have fall on me and other superintendents, and we're also looking at a new state program that offers sort of a parts management style program that saves the city several $100,000 a year across the board on parts and services and aids in the procurement of those items.
And one more question on, lost my spot here. On the motor equipment, repairman, you're asking for 74,000 and the mayor's saying $1. Is that just to hold it? By union rule, you have to keep the
It is.
dollar there? Okay, are you looking to, is that gonna hurt you by not having that, or are you looking for a position, someone to fill it?
It's been unfilled for a number of months, and we've been able to keep up with the current preventive maintenance schedule.
How many mechanics do we have in the yard, down the city yard?
There are 3 full-time mechanics down the city.
3? Full-time. All right, thank you.
Counselor McLaughlin is next.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. The POTS program and the citywide seasonal expenditures look like both new line items, page 81.
So the citywide seasonal expenditures was reallocated between facilities and DPW. DPW ends up hanging and installing a number of the seasonal items that are purchased predominantly around Christmas time. The parts program is a program I just mentioned a minute ago. This allows the city to save anywhere from 10 to 20% on the parts and services that we typically run in the fleet department. It also helps out with the procurement of paper goods, office supplies. We get reduced rates basically by buying in bulk through this type of state-approved program. So we should see, even though it's a new line item, we should see savings across the board on that.
So I think just to add, I sort of know where you're going with this, just to add, one of the things that you're not seeing is some revenue that's coming in. So underneath this new program through the state, we purchase all of our parts through this program, which actually the savings can be upwards of 30% in some of our areas. However, we have to purchase everything through them. And again, statewide contract. So what they're actually going to do is all of the inventory that we have down there now, they're going to be cutting a check for us, dollar for dollar, on each of those parts. A lot of those parts are actually already obsolete parts that are actually really of no use to us, given the fact that we may have a truck gone that we would have had to use those parts for. So we're going to be getting dollar for dollar on those parts. They're going to be cutting us a check. That will be coming in as revenue. So we no longer are going to have any existing inventory. So typically from year to year, you always have inventory that you carry from one year to the next, and you're constantly replenishing that inventory. We're starting the year with no inventory, but we are getting revenue in. It's just a matter of gross-based budgeting and showing you that money here.
All right, I'm good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well said. I apologize. Counselor Marchese.
After your recommendation for the salaries and everything else, how did we go up $600,000 in the expenses? I mean, last year, 2019, we expended, what, $468,000, right? And that was actually $300,000 down from the budget. And this year, we had another $600,000 requested. What is the difference in 1 year?
Well, the 468 was only through, I believe, the beginning of May. We still have 2 months to go through, and it doesn't reflect a lot of purchase orders. We're going to be coming in very close to the budgeted amount of the 768. The large increase are really those first 2 line items. So it was moving those seasonal expenditures out of facilities and the 200,000 for the parts. So that really.
Where were they coming from before the parts program, the citywide, if they weren't here before?
The 200,000 is new from the parts program.
It's new?
It's-
Okay.
it's-
Where did
it's
we
new
buy
be-
the parts prior to that?
Various entities.
And what fund would that come out of?
Well, that one is actually new. That's not coming from another department.
Yeah.
That's because we no longer are going to have any inventory. So the parts program through the state program, they're going to come back and they're going to cut us a check, dollar for dollar, on all of our existing inventory. So we're starting the year with nothing.
In citywide seasonal expenditures, what does that include? Is that salt? What is it?
No, it's a lot of the, as we're buying new streetlights to go down Broadway and
Yep.
transform some of the other areas of the city, we need to buy new ornamental decorations for those.
Didn't we appropriate over close to like $1 million, $2 million for new streetlights, if you go all the way to Malden?
Correct.
Is this part of it here, or is
Yeah.
it something different?
No, so as an example, the Christmas trees that you've seen on Broadway in front
Yep.
of City Hall, that fixture is not correctly sized or has the same mounting mechanisms for the decorative
Yep.
poles. So we require to buy new street lights.
Which again was typically handled through facilities, but it's always DPW, the executive division, that actually is always the ones that are hanging and doing everything. So it was a matter of what we budgeted in the past, moving it over to DPW executive.
All right,
But we do have to buy new types of decorations to hang, just given that those new decorative lights are different.
Okay, so, but we didn't spend any money in 2019 on any, right?
That would have been under the facilities line.
Facilities line.
So the facilities line in 2018, I believe, was close to $80,000.
On page 87.
I do want to avoid jumping all around, but for conversational purpose,
Yep.
we'll look at that one line item.
Just because it
Yeah.
was shifted, that's
Yep.
why.
Uh, 5213, third line item down.
City building seasonal expense.
Yep. It's still here, isn't it?
So we've reduced it to 25,000. We've been reviewing a number of outside vendors that can decorate City Hall, Warner Park, and some of those areas are handled directly by facilities. So we've left that funding there right now.
Oh, just, okay. I'll wait till we get to the slide. Thank you.
All right, Counselor McLaughlin. I'm sorry, Counselor Napolitano, then McLaughlin. I apologize.
Thank you.
Skip anyone, I'm sorry.
I just want to piggyback on one of the questions that Councilor Marchese was asking, because I think I know what he was getting at, and I'm going to ask in a different way. And it's going back to the parts. Okay, now, I understand that the line item is a new item. I know we're getting revenue back when we're clearing out our inventory. So we're now going to be purchasing parts just as we need them to some extent through this program?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess the question that he was trying to say was, prior to this program, what line item were the expenditure for parts before? In other words, what is this replacing? Because obviously, we've been spending money, we're buying parts every year, so there has to be a line item somewhere. Where would we find that, so we can see what was, to get a better idea? Now, again, I'm going to factor the revenue refund back as a plus. But just want to...
Like one of the big areas that you can see, DPW repair maintenance. In
Which page?
It's on 81.
Okay.
5546.
It was budgeted at 223. We're reducing it to 190,000 this year.
Okay.
It's in various locations.
All right, so
In addition to that, it's also going to be in facilities as well. So a lot of the stuff that facilities purchases, we're now going to be able to purchase through this statewide program. In addition to that, once we have that up and running for the hardware, tires, any parts that we would need for automotive repairs, truck repairs, we're actually going to start looking to expand in and working with the schools on office supplies as well, because they supply those items as well. But the big thing, and really why you're seeing a big jump here, is really that inventory. Everything that we're going to have on hand, they're going to purchase back from us.
Right.
So
And
we'll
this
be
is-
bringing it in as revenue.
And this is affecting what would have been various line items at various departments.
It is.
That are all parts. So it's all coming under one heading. Okay, so police cars?
Yes,
Fire trucks.
absolutely. And anything that fleet handles, facilities handles, it's also going to be benefiting general DPW administration. It's going to benefit the water sewer departments.
So that's why we're not seeing one large drop somewhere
Reduction
else.
in one specific
We're
line.
seeing multiples across several line items. Any possibility we can get a compilation of those line items? Just so we
Sure,
know
and
what they are?
we're going to be implementing this come early July. We
Okay.
still don't know what the full implications are, what the full savings are.
But I mean regarding the budget.
Sure, absolutely.
Just regarding the budget. So this way we can kind of look at a, apples to apples comparison, keeping in mind the difference between the two.
And the other piece, I will let you know that there will be still be a deviation, given the fact that there will be no inventory.
Yeah.
You know, so that all goes away.
No, there's definitely some
Yep.
long-term, positives, and I'm not questioning that. I just think that information would better serve the answer that the council was looking for, because again, it does give us a better idea, at least
Sure.
in the kickoff and the initial, because we also can't calculate what we're going to get refunded back, but if we're getting money back for out-of-date equipment, nothing wrong with that.
Precisely. And the way the contract is written and the way that the state has written this, we're actually signing on for a year. However, at any time, if we're dissatisfied, the state put in a caveat that we can terminate the program in 60 days. At that point, we wouldn't even have to buy back our old obsolete.
Turnaround time for equipment?
So
We
they-
order it, we have to order it, I think?
So they guarantee, I believe it's a 90% on-shelf rate, and then anything else they can basically pull from their local other vendors. Just as a frame of reference, both Boston and I believe it's Needham or Newton have this program in place. I've been there, all the mechanics, all the superintendents down in the fleet division of Boston love the program. It just doesn't appear to have a downside for me right now. And with the reduction of the fleet manager and business manager, this will actually support those maneuvers as well.
As long as the turnaround time's not, we're not adding a longer turnaround time, again, you
I
have
agree.
experience with that, and we're saving money, we're not having to buy things that we can't use, I think it's great.
And just so that you're aware too, what we're actually doing is cutting out the middleman. So the company that we're using is Nationwide, and they're the company that supplies like Napa. So Napa is one of the stores where we would go to purchase automotive stuff. We're actually bypassing Napa and going directly to their supplier as well.
Nice.
So
Thank you.
anytime a part changes hands, it just increases the cost. We're trying to reduce those costs.
Very good, thank you.
Councilor McLaughlin?
Thanks, Chair. So just a couple of questions on these two line items, not to beat into the ground, but you now have to buy all the pots bulk. So so you're not buying, so water pump, for example, you're not buying 20 water pumps at a time because you're saving, okay. So you're buying, so it's an individual purchase. I thought it was a bulk item program.
They, as a company, are more of a wholesaler, and they're passing through those savings to us.
Okay, all right, and I do see long-term benefit on that. The citywide seasonal expenditures. I know the Chamber of Commerce runs a very successful flag program. 4 times a year, the flags get changed throughout on the flag poles. Is that sort of the same thing that this is going to be? So can we go back to the businesses and see if more businesses want to extend that program and make that program even bigger with these new poles, with these new lights down Lower Broadway? Obviously, there's a huge benefit having your business on a light pole that's in the casino district of Everett. Is that something that the administration has thought of, something that we can't think of, to maybe see if businesses that, because I do know the chamber usually has a list that they don't have enough poles or enough to be able to extend the program to everyone. Is that something that we could look at to see if they would be interested? And I know kind of gets into, everybody wants to go down there at that point, but is that something we can look at? Is that a reasonable thought?
Certainly, we can look at that as offsetting some of this. I think when we were talking about this internally, we know we have 40 ornamental lights going from Sweetser Circle up through Glendale. We're going to have another set that the council approved through the planning department. They're going to come on. We still need to go through the process of bringing that vendor online. We're in negotiations with National Grid, as you can imagine, on transferring ownership of the streetlights to the city when we switch to those ornamentals, as we've discussed in the CIP project, and buying some of the aerial trucks that support these different maneuvers. And then following Northern Broadway, if that's completed next year, then we're going to be into the 2021 timeframe when Ferry and Elm Street are going to have new ornamental lights. We just have 4 or 5 years where we're going to see or we're going to need to improve, and we know we're going to end up buying new ornamental fixtures on a lot of these different streetlights.
The ornamental fixtures, are the decorations for these
The
lights?
decorations, I
what
apologize.
It is very, so it's the flower pots in the summertime or what Christmas lights at the Christmas season, holiday season?
And as you can imagine, the vendors for these things are limited in number, and we're buying these things, online, and they know who they're marketing.
Sure. No, and I understand it, but again, to have the businesses get involved and to be able to have them advertise their business on, again,
Certainly.
the flagpole program that the Chamber of Commerce runs, I know is very successful. So I'm wondering if there's a possibility of looking into that to see if we could
I'll
extend
certainly
that.
reach out to them and see.
To see if that's a possibility for, and just where do these numbers drive from? Where do they come from? Because they're both two new line items this year. Well, they're not particularly new, as you just said, Eric, but they're been merged together. So where do they come from, these two line items, the dollar values of these?
So I believe the Councilor Napolitano asked for a breakdown of that. I mean, that will certainly detail
Will
that
reflect
further.
close to that number, though, roughly?
I think it'll identify a number of.
It will, but I think where you really have to take a look at it is once we implement it and we get that check for all of those obsolete parts, which will offset a lot of this.
No,
It's just gross-based budgeting.
No, but that's fine, but the citywide season is the one I was more kind of going after.
Yep, and the facilities line item that we had discussed a moment ago was 83,000. So that's an increase to 125 between the two accounts.
Yep.
But we split it up based on who's doing what activity in the city.
Okay.
And to your point, I know the chair doesn't want to jump around, but we just pointed this out to another counselor on page 87 in facilities. When you take a look at the seasonal, the city building seasonal expenditure.
It has decreased.
That one decreased by about 80,000.
Okay. All right, that's fine. And the last thing is towing. What is the towing line item? Is that for our vehicles? It's a small dollar value, was just curious of what.
Yeah, it's not used very frequently, but certainly if the Packer broke down, it requires a specific.
Understand. Thank you.
All right, we'll move on. There's, only thing on 82 is the totals. Are there any questions there? Page 83. Page 84. Page 85. Page 86. Page 87, facilities. Page 88, Councilor Capone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll point out that for the most part, I've seen the 2% cost of living, which is something I've consistently done throughout this. So not that I'm thrilled about seeing a 2% raise, because obviously, I'd like to see people have more than that if it were possible, but it is consistent with everything else that's happened. The only one thing that I do point out is with facility maintenance. It looks like there was a reclassification in the middle of the fiscal year. I've also pointed that out throughout the process, that I'm personally not happy about a reclassification of a salary in the middle of a fiscal year, because what it does, in my opinion, from my perspective, is it removes the council from that process. I think that's what we do at the budget time. So I just wanted to express my displeasure at that, consistent with what I've done in other departments. So other than that, there was a assistant facility superintendent that came in. Looks like it was a new hire, and the amount that's budgeted off of that for this fiscal year, it looks like that reflects a 2% over whatever that person was brought in at.
That's
Is that
correct.
accurate? Okay. All right, thank you. I don't have any other questions.
Councilor Della Sola.
On, let's see, custodian, and Yeah, on the custodian and on general maintenance, there's 1, 2, 3. There's 6 positions. We appropriated 19, and we're not having them for 2020? Am I reading that right?
No. Consistent with where I think you've seen it in other areas, as a result of executing the DPW union contract, a number of positions were reclassified. So that's why you see a number of them at 0, and then right below that with the same, oh, you can actually see the names. They just moved to a different step on their union salary scale. But to your point, there were 6 budgeted positions in FY19, where actually there are 5 in this budget. There was a vacancy that we did not budget to fill, moving into FY20.
All right, thank you.
Anything else on 88? 89? Page 90. Page 91, Council McLaughlin.
Mr. Chairman, I just, I apologize, I lost my train of thought. Go on, I'll talk to George Lane afterwards about it. I'm all set.
You all set? Page 91.
That was my question, Mr. Chairman, sorry. I don't have my budget book in front of me tonight. I had to borrow Council DeFlorio, so I'm a little confused by this. I apologize. The overtime on engineering division on page 91. So if an emergency comes in, there is no overtime allowed for emergency road work?
The overtime would only be eligible, there are only 2 positions in the engineering department. One is the engineer, who is salary and does not receive overtime.
Okay.
The other individual is the clerical staff member that is an hourly employee and would be eligible for overtime. However, we work our best to make sure that we absolutely limit the amount of clerical overtime that we need. And we don't anticipate any. We didn't have any during fiscal 18, none in FY19, so it was budgeted at $500, and this was an area to grab $500.
No, that's fine. I was just thinking, the engineer on salary, I get it, but being in the water and business, I know that sometimes you're called out during the middle of the night for a major water break or other things that happen, especially in winter weather and so forth. So I was just questioning whether I would think about that.
I can assure you they will far exceed 35 hours a week on average.
I do agree with you on that, Mr. Davis, that's for sure.
Page 92. 93. '94. 95. 96. 97. 'Give everyone a moment to catch up. 98. 99. 100. Council McLaughlin?
Mr. Chairman, on salaries, it looks like it has gone up about $100,000. Am I in there? 900,000 or $1 million? Is that contract?
Non-administrative went up 2%. This
Yep.
reflects the DPW union contract, 3 years of the union contract kicking in.
So it's the contract?
Yes.
Okay.
Councilor Napolitano?
Yeah, I just want to go back to page 98 for a minute. Something that just never really thought to make this correlation. So to maintain the stadium division, the budget is 51,000?
Yes.
That's what we're asking for, right? Correct. And if my memory serves correct, when the school department was up here, the school department reimburses the stadium department 45,000 for use of the stadium? 46,000? So the school pays the majority of this item then?
Sure.
Okay.
You could look at it that way.
I just never, because we don't normally take those budgets together, I just never realized how much of this was being, you know.
Yeah, they are the
folded by
predominant users, and again, as Mr. Obremski said, the terms of the chargeback contract go back to when there was ed reform, 93, 94. So this is something that the city and schools have agreed to for a number of years.
Right,
And so we haven't proposed any changes.
Yeah, and I'm obviously not going to make anything about this budget, but, you know, just as a personal recommendation, I would suggest maybe next year, you might want to revisit that formula. That's really, that means it's costing the city $5,000 a year to fund the entire stadium program, and though they may use it for the majority, they're also part of the city as well. You might want to take another look at those numbers and appreciate some consideration in that area.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Councilor McLaughlin?
On page 100, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
enhanced crosswalks under capital improvements. And I know we accepted the capital improvement plan that was put before us at the Saturday budget hearing, but, so is this line item budget zeroed out this year, or did it just get moved over to the capital improvement plan there? Because last year we budgeted for 100,000, this year we budgeted for 0. But I know that we talked about crosswalks that would be done
Sure.
this coming year.
So in the CIP, I'll just break down very quickly into the 3 funding sources. One would be issuing debt, another would be the operating fund through taxation, and then grants. So last year, as part of the overall CIP, we had included, for enhanced crosswalks, budgeting 100,000. This year, we're not including the operating fund, the general fund, as a funding source. So when you do see enhanced crosswalks on the CIP, we're proposing to be using Chapter 90 funds, as well as any road work that would be done paid by bonding. So we're just pulling that piece out of the operating fund, not paying it through taxation,
And shifting
and
it
trying
over
to shift
to-
some of that into the state aid, and the Chapter 90 state aid.
Okay, all right. No, I was just wondering, because I know the mayor and I had talked about some crosswalks around that English school. Thank you.
Page 101? (102). 103. 104. 105. 106. Councilor Hanlon?
Just on the recyclable disposable, we budgeted $300,000 for last year. We didn't spend it, and yet this year we're asking for $450,000. What's the reason for the big upscale increase?
Complicated answer to a simple question.
Forget I asked.
China.
So the good news is we participated in a Mass DEP IQ program this past summer, and we tried to educate a number of the residents on things you can't recycle. Garden hoses are not recycling. Concrete blocks are not recycling. Heavy pieces of metal that are, generally, parts of cars are not recycling. Taking all of that weight out of the recycling stream does inherently drop the tonnage. Unfortunately, the market, the global market for recycling, I think we all know, is just going in circles and spiraling downward. And certainly there's other markets aside from China that are trying to pick up that slack. But everyone around the state is seeing prices. There's just no market for these things, or they have to handle it and process it to a much higher degree. So in talking to a number of different vendors, we're trying to forecast forward what we believe the market rate is going to be. And, a lot of discussion. We think this number is a safe number for us to budget.
Councilor Marchese?
Why can't we just stop the program? Would it be cheaper to just have one barrel go out there?
At a very simple level, we've tried to, or a number of communities have discussed stopping recycling. Anything from removing just glass, because there was a glass facility that was closed recently. Just removing glass from the recycling stream would inherently divert that tonnage from what's a higher rate per ton to recycle than it is for our waste. So we've discussed anything from just recycling cardboard to removing glass to making aggregate out of glass. There are a number of permits that go along with these landfills that the landfills themselves will not accept a load of cardboard. It violates their permit, and they're not willing to get audited on a random day and accept a truckload of cardboard. So to say it's a heavily regulated industry, we're trying to navigate that path and see what we can do that will both save the taxpayers money and be
Why don't we go back to the
environmentally-
small little barrels for the waste if we can't do anything anymore?
Also-
Wouldn't we save a lot more money on that?
We've discussed that as well, and as you may have seen on trash day, the wind can blow some of those items around, and then we just end up picking it up off the street, and then it ends up being a nuisance call as opposed to a recycling venture, so.
Plenty of cars with everything on, driving around the city, they can stop and pick up a piece of cardboard. It's not that hard.
Absolutely.
I do it myself.
If you see it, pick it up, please.
Well, we always do. The red truck. Yeah, believe me. Thank you.
Final page, 107. Don't see any further questions. Councilor McLaughlin, I apologize, you didn't have the hand.
That's okay, Mr. Chairman. No, Mr. Chairman, just before we close, I wanted to take the opportunity, because George Lane is here, to thank him for the unbelievable job that he did this year at Sacramone Park with the Snack Shack, that many of us had gone to the administration and asked that they would look at being able to bring that project in-house to be able to save a significant amount of money. And George Lane took that project on with his crew and did an unbelievable job. And we all saw it a few weeks ago when we were down there for opening day of Little League Baseball. That building came out better than anybody could have expected, under budgeted and on time. We appreciate the efforts of you and your department and what your men have done under your leadership in that one project, amongst many other projects you've taken on since you've taken over the role of the position you're in. But I wanted to personally thank you for what you did down at Sacramone Park. I appreciate working with you on that project closely. Thanks, George.
Thank you. It was a pleasure working for the city, and just to have the opportunity to build that. Mr. St. Louis, his department leans a lot towards us, and we do everything jointly. The gazebo we just finished, a great joint project between the DPW and facilities. Can't say enough of the support you get in this city when we do venture into a project like that. And once again, I just want to thank you for the opportunity of doing this. What we love doing the best, so anytime. You want another one, let me know.
Are we all set with our guest? Yes. What page was it, Counselor?
Thank you. It's the DPW maintenance, the line, the second one down. You asked for 223, you got 190, cut 33,000, and it's the explanation that I don't understand. It says, buildings are getting older, doing all repairs in-house. If the building is getting older, why did we cut down the expenses of repairing them?
The notes don't reflect the ending portion of the budget process when we actually reduced the request. And again, this is where we think we can utilize some savings.
Okay. It's an answer, okay.
Are we all set with our guests? Thank you very much. Are there any recommendations?
Yeah, favorable action, Mr. Chairman.
All right, with that, the recommendations that were passed between last Saturday's meeting and now were a total of $22,200 in cuts. The committee has approved the Water Sewer Enterprise Budget Fund, the ECTV Budget Fund, and Mr. Demas, do you have a date on when we will get the capital improvement fully presented to us?
Yes, in order to give the council as much time as possible, and assuming that you're probably going to put that into Ways and Means, we want to make sure we incorporate time for that process as well. We'll be submitting the CIP, the initial round of CIP for the next meeting, in hopes that between that meeting, Ways and Means, and then the final meeting of June, we can get some action.
The clerk has informed me that there's no Ways and Means meetings scheduled before the finalization of this document, so if we have to get together.
No, I was referring simply to CIP, not the operating budget.
Okay.
So the CIP, what we were thinking on is actually, the CIP that what we're thinking on is we would submit it for the first meeting in June. Between the first meeting and the second meeting in June, you have a Ways and Means scheduled, and then you have the last meeting in June.
Well, I'm sure we can work out the logistics as
Either
we
way,
move forward.
you'll have two meetings, and we'd be more than happy to answer any of the council's questions.
We'll work out the logistics moving forward. I appreciate my colleagues' cooperation over the last few meetings. It's evident as a group we're city's in a strong financial position going into FY 2020, and it's only going to get better. Moving on, I want to thank everyone for their work, and I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Motion made and seconded for adjournment. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you.